Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel. So, yesterday we did a Smite 2 God tier list post-playoffs. And today we're going to kind of complete the set, I suppose, into an item tier list as well. We're going to be ranking all of Smite 2's items from S to F based on generally how useful they are in your builds. And I've got Smite2.live open on my other tab as well, so I'm going to explain all of the items as I go through, because I know a lot of people aren't familiar with every single item in the game in Smite 2 yet. Even I am not familiar with the exact stats of some of the less popular items. So don't worry, as I rank all of the items, I'll be going over here and explaining what the stats are and all that good stuff if you're not familiar. But yeah, kicking things off with our first item, we have Yogi's necklace, which is basically the sort of Stone of Gaia equivalent in Smite 2, essentially. It gives you a ton of max health, a ton of max mana, a ton of HP 5, ton of MP 5. Oh, I shouldn't say HP 5 and MP 5. That's what it says on Smite2.live, but it's not HP 5 and MP 5 in Smite 2. It's health per second and mana per second instead of health and mana per 5 seconds. So essentially, this item is equivalent to 70 HP 5 and 30 MP 5. So it is a lot of regen. Obviously, Stone of Gaia had the extra passive in Smite 1 that gave it even more regen. But in general, I don't think these items are super useful when they give like no protections. Just straight up health on an item is generally pretty terrible. Protections are a much more efficient way of giving you more tankiness overall. You do want some health in your build, but there are plenty of items in the game that come with a lot of health and some protections as well, or a lot of protections and some health, and you generally want to find a balance of that. I don't think Yogi's necklace is a super useful item. I'm going to throw it to E tier. Next up, we have Wish Granting Pearl, which is basically the intelligence, max health, and max mana. That's all this item gives. It is relatively cheap, and it's just for your intelligence users that might want either a little bit of max health in their build. You know, maybe if you're something like an Anubis mid or whatever, you might want a little bit more survivability, or it's for like your sort of Guardian style solos that use it pretty heavily and also want a little bit of that max health. And I think this item's okay. I think I'm going to throw it to the C tier. I think it is a little underrated. No one really builds it at the moment, but it's a pretty big stat pile for the amount of money that you spend on it. 80 int is reasonably high. It's by no means the highest in the game or anything like that, but it also does come with 250 health, which is pretty decent as well. Moving on to Void Stone. So this is a Smite 1 item. You're probably familiar with it. It works in a very similar way. It just gives you int, magical procs, max health, and reduces enemy magical protections in an aura around you by 10%. And Void Stone, I think I will also throw to the C tier. I think it's a fine item, especially on your intelligence-based solos. If you maybe have, you know, like a solid EC and a mage mid as well, this can be especially useful. You get more shred for your magical teammates. And yeah, in general, I think Void Stone's a fine item, but it's nothing exceptional, really. Void Shield, I think I'll throw to 1 tier higher, though. So Void Shield is essentially the inverse. It's the physical equivalent of Void Stone. Gives you strength, physical protections, max health, and 10% physical shred aura. And the general reason why I have Void Shield 1 tier higher than Void Stone is that I think it's just a lot more applicable in a lot of your builds. You know, most solo lanes are going to be dealing physical damage in Smite 2, and also a lot of junglers are going to be dealing physical damage that might want to go some bruiser and will pick up a Void Shield. They are very similar items. They do very similar things with very similar stat spreads, but I think in general Void Shield is just a little more useful because generally you're going to be able to build it on more solo laners and more bruiser jungles, and you'll be able to build Void Stone on. Typhon's Fang. So this is an interesting one. I thought this item was going to be super good. I thought it was going to be pretty broken, but honestly it's turned out to not be overall that amazing. I think I'll drop it to C for now. But yeah, Typhon's Fang is just 40 intelligence, 35% lifesteal. That's all it gives. It's relatively expensive, which is probably the reason why it's not built all too much. You know, you would much rather just rush something like Soul Gem that is cheaper and gives you a lot of other stuff in addition to the healing. And yeah, Typhon's is fine. Maybe if they added the passive back to it or something, it would see a little bit more play. But honestly, it's just so low on other stats. Really, you're buying this entirely for the lifesteal, and so you're going to want it a bit later in your build, of course, when you're dealing more damage and you're going to get more value from that lifesteal. And lifesteal is powerful in Smite 2, absolutely, because you get full value from AoE abilities. So building this on like a mage or something, if you're hitting 3 people in a team fight, you're going to get a lot of value. But they did also apply that 33% lifesteal to minions. So in a way, like in terms of just sustaining yourself off of waves, it's about the same as Smite 1. And yeah, overall, I don't think Typhon's is super strong. And actually, I've just realized how many items we have to get through here. I think it's like over 80 different items, so we might speed up a little bit as we go through this. So Triton's Conch, I think, is a pretty decent item. I'm going to throw it to the B tier. And this is sort of, it's a similar-ish stat spread to Wish Granting Pearl, actually. It just gives strength, intelligence, max health, and then a passive aura to give strength and intelligence to all nearby allies, which of course passive auras apply to you as well in Smite. So basically, this is just going to give you a crap ton of strength, intelligence, and max health. It's really good on bruisers that use both kind of stats, like Amaterasu or Mordred. Maybe Chak as well, like any of those like solo lane bruisers, or maybe even some support bruisers that want a little bit more damage. You're going to be just giving some extra stats to your team and also getting a lot of strength, intelligence, max health for yourself. Transcendence Transcendence, I think I'll throw to the B tier as well. This is a Smite 1 item, you're probably familiar, but basically it gives you strength, max mana, MP5, and then more mana per stack. 50 stacks it evolves and gains 10 penetration, and converts 2% of your max mana to strength. And yeah, I think Transcendence is good in Smite 2 right now. The infinite mana is a little bit less relevant. Mana's not exactly a major issue for most characters in Smite 2, but this is basically the highest strength item in the game. I believe it does give a lot of power. So if you got a lot of high strength scalings, if you're an auto canceller that gets a lot of free 100% strength scaling on all of your basic attacks in between abilities and stuff, this could be a really powerful item. Next up is Totem of Death, which I think I'll throw to the B tier as well. So Totem of Death is sort of like the executioner for abilities. It gives you intelligence, cooldown rate, and whenever you hit someone with an ability, you get a stack of 7.5% pen up to 4 times for a total of 30% pen. And 30% pen is a lot. Don't get it twisted. This really works well on certain characters. I don't think it's an auto build on like many mages in the game, for example, or many characters in the game in general. But of course, this can stack multiple times per ability. So if you hit 4 ticks of your Anubis ult, you're immediately up to 30% pen. You're going to be kind of shredding people down. So I think on certain picks with tick damage abilities, Totem of Death is really good. But it is a bit more of a niche situational item. Titan's Bane we'll throw to the A tier, just a fundamentally great item. You all know Titan's Bane, it works very similar to the way it does in Smite 1, you just gain 20% penetration straight up. It doesn't have the extra passive where your first ability every 10 seconds gains 20% more pen, but basically you're going to need percent pen at some point. Tanks are really strong in Smite 2 at the moment. And even if they weren't particularly strong and overrepresented in the meta, which I think they are, tanks in general, you're still just going to want some percent pen in your build at some point to be able to deal with tanks. Most teams are going to have 2 tanks, they might even have a Bruiser jungle. Titan's Bane is just a good item. You're going to need some percent pen. It's that simple. Moving on to Worldstone, which I think I'll throw to the D tier. I'm not a massive fan of Worldstone. I like the item. I think it's really cool, honestly, but it's so expensive for what it does. So this gives you intelligence, max mana, MP5 cooldown rate, and your ultimate cooldown is reduced by 20%. I'm not actually entirely sure on the mechanics of how this cooldown reduction works. I don't know if it applies post cooldown rate calculations or pre-cooldown rate calculations. I'm not sure if that even matters. But yeah, in general, I do like the item. I think it's a lot of fun. If you're a character that's very reliant on their ultimate and really gets a lot of value out of having that up super often, and you're an intelligence-based character, you can buy this, but 2,800 gold is just very steep for this item, and I don't think it's really worth picking up all too much. Executioner we'll throw to the A tier. Basically the same argument as Titan's Bane. Executioner basically is like the equivalent to Totem of Death, but for basic attacks. And this is just going to give you 30 strength, 20% attack speed, and then that piercing effect. By the way, these two don't stack. You can't stack more, like multiple instances of piercing on yourself at once, so you're still only going to get to a maximum of 30% pen regardless of how many piercing effects you have. But yeah, it's the Executioner. Again, as I said, you're going to need percent pen, especially so in ADC builds because it's their job to shred down tanks, and this is one of the best percent pen items in the game. Executioner is good. Crusher, I think I'll throw to the B tier. Crusher is fine at the moment, I would say. It's a pretty decent item, but nothing too special. This just gives you strength, 10% pen, some cooldown rate, which is interesting. It's not something it gave in Smite 1, which I do think is very valuable for it because the passive makes you want to spam abilities on people. It just deals 35% of your strength as extra damage. So like all of your abilities basically gain 35% strength scaling. Subsequent hits do half bonus damage, so it's not quite that good. But yeah, it just adds a ton of extra damage to your abilities. It's really good on characters that have low cooldowns and can easily just spam proc on people like Loki and stuff like that. Crusher is a good item. Cosmic Horror, I think I'll throw to the B tier. This used to be one of the best in cooldown items in the game, but it has fallen off a little bit. It's basically now equivalent to a standard 25 cooldown rate item. So you can see it here. It gets intelligence, max mana, MP5 cooldown rate, and then if you have more than 300 item intelligence, you gain 10 cooldown rate. You can basically read this as 25 cooldown rate and delete the passive, because if you're buying this, you're going to have more than 300 item intelligence, otherwise what's the point in buying it? And it's very easy to hit over 300 item intelligence. You can do that in about 3 items a lot of the time. Or 3 items before Cosmic Horror is what I mean. You know, that 85 will definitely put you over the limit. So basically it's 85 in, some mana, and 25 cooldown for 2650 gold. It's honestly not that great anymore. It did take some nerfs recently. Not super recently, but like a month or 2 ago or something like that. It used to be in basically every single int cooldown build, but there's honestly better options now in my opinion. But it is still a solid item. If you do want to go it still gives a decent amount of int and cooldown if you do want to grab that, so it's going to go to the B tier. Talisman of Purification goes straight to the S tier. This is one of the best items in the game, and it's probably no surprise to anyone why this is one of the best items in the game. It's AoE CC immunity on 180-second cooldown. Basically, there's a lack of relic options. Not a lack of relic options, but obviously you have 1 relic instead of 2 in Smite 2. And so being able to bees for your entire team, the support builds this every game in their first 2 items. If you don't, you're trolling, and solo laners often build this as well. You even occasionally see some bruiser junglers picking this up. And very rarely I've even seen a damage roll pick this up, an ADC or a mid if they especially needed beads in a certain situation. You know, if you need 2 sets of beads or whatever, or if you got Aegis but you need beads if you're up against like Poseidon or whatever. So yeah, this is one of the best items in the game, if not the best item in the game. Absolutely worth building on all of your tanks, and probably worth building occasionally on like bruiser jungles and stuff. Stone of Binding is fine. I think I'll throw it to the B tier. So this works basically identically to the way it works in Smite 1. 40 physical prot, 30 magical prot, 100 health, and then enemy gods hit by your hard CCs lose 15 physical and magical protection. The difference, I guess, in Smite 2 is that it's hard CC now, so some gods that are very, like, slow reliant and might have gone Stone of Binding before, slows aren't going to proc the effect anymore, it's only hard CC. But a lot of the time, you're going to have some hard CC to realistically proc this. It lasts 4 seconds, so if you have multiple hard CCs in your base kit, this is when this item becomes especially good. And it's flat penetration as well. Flat penetration is very hard to come by in Smite 2, so it definitely is really powerful when you can get your hands on it. So I think Stone of Binding is a pretty good item. Stampede, this is the sprint active. We'll throw it to C for now, but let's have a look at the stats. So 55 procs, 200 health, 5 HP, 5. So not amazing base stats, honestly, but it's decent. And then you and allied gods within 6.4 meters gain 30% movement speed for 4 seconds with a 60-second cooldown. So it is a relatively low cooldown item. I think this would be a lot better if it did provide slow immunity like Heavenly Wings did in Smite 1. That will make it a lot better counter to, you know, massive AoE slows like Cupid ult and stuff like that. And honestly, now that I've looked at the item, it probably is a little bit better than I'm giving it credit for. The cooldown is very low on this, so you can sprint your team into and out of fights pretty often. But yeah, if it had slow immunity, it would definitely be a lot more attractive. Spirit Robe, I think I'll throw to the A tier. Spirit Robe is just a great fundamental item that you're never really sad about building. The base stats are kind of bad. It's 30 physical, 30 magical protections, but whenever you're hit by a hard CC effect, you gain 40 of each. So it's 70 and 70, which is a lot of protections, especially by Smite 2 standards, where protections are generally lower, base stats on everything is generally lower. And basically, a lot of the time, you're going to be taking damage, you're going to have been hard CC'd in the last 4 seconds anyway, so you're pretty much always having these procs when you realistically really need them, and 70 of each procs is really good. Obviously, it doesn't come with anything else, doesn't have any cooldown rate like it did in Smite 1, which makes me maybe want to drop it 1 tier, which I think I will do, actually. I think B tier is a better home for Spirit Robe. It is a really good item, but I won't say it's anything super exceptional. But yeah, it does make you incredibly tanky when you do get hit by those hard CCs. If people are trying to burst you down with some hard CC lockdown, you get 70 of each procs, which is really good. Next up, we have Sphere of Negation, which I'll just throw here for now. It's not necessarily where I'm going to put it, but we'll have a look at the stats. This is 70 int, 40 magical protection for 2350 gold. It's a very simple item. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of it. It is okay in some niche scenarios where you're like maybe a damage dealer that just wants a little bit of magical prot, if like maybe they have a Zeus mid, a Sol ADC or something that are completely shredding you down. But honestly, the stats for the cost aren't even that appealing. There's generally better options if you want to go this kind of thing. Honestly, I think Wish Granting Pearl is probably a better option. It's cheaper, it has more in, and then 250 max health versus 40 magical protection is probably a trade in Wish Granting Pearl's favor. So I think if you're going to go an item like this, Wish Granting Pearl or Triton's conch are probably just better. So yeah, actually where I put it is probably fine. I think it's probably is a D tier item. I don't think it's really that great. Spectral armor. At the moment, I think I'll throw Spectral armor to the C tier, mainly because crit is not super strong right now. We'll get to crit probably further down the item tier list. But yeah, Spectral armor is 60 physical prot, 200 max health, and enemies within 8.8 meters lose 20% attack speed and 20% crit chance. So it's not going to be reducing the crit damage that you take, but it is going to be reducing that crit chance. And crit chance also is generally a little bit harder to come by and a little bit lower in total in Smite 2. There's only 4 total crit items in the game. And I do think this item's really strong in the situations where it is good. You know, if you're dealing with a physical hunter style character, you know, a Kurdanos, an Anher, or a Jingwei or something like that, it is really good in those scenarios. The problem is crit is not popular right now, and it's also pretty bad against any magical crit users like Sol or Zeus. And so generally, Spectral armor is good in some situations, but it's not like a super exceptional item at the moment. If crit comes flying back into the meta and we maybe get some junglers that start going crit like Mercury and stuff like that, then maybe it becomes a lot more popular. But at the moment, I think it's just kind of fine. Spear of Deso, I think I'll throw to the C tier as well, probably. This is 90 int, 5% pen, and then a very similar passive to Smite 1. You get 1 second off your non-ultimate cooldowns and 5 seconds off your ultimate cooldown whenever you get a kill or an assist. And yeah, I think this item's just fine. The lack of flat penetration in Smite 2 has definitely hurt these kind of items. You know, generally this was one of the go-to like second item rushes after like your Doom Orb or your Book of Thought or your Warlock staff in Smite 1. But the fact that it has 5% pen is kind of weak, honestly. Even as you're getting towards the late game, 5% pen isn't going to do too much for you. And yes, the passive is useful, but it doesn't really provide anything else. There's no cooldown on it. There's no flat pen on it like there used to be in Smite 1. So honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Deso right now. I think you can definitely skip it in your builds. Soul Reaver is an interesting one. So this was basically the best item in the game for a long time. For a long time in Smite 2's alpha, before this thing got nerfed into the ground, it was one of the best items in the game. I think now I'm going to throw it to the C tier, tentatively. Let's have a look at what it actually does, but it did get absolutely omega nerfed. So it's 50 int, 300 mana, 5 MP5 for 3,000 gold. The base stats are absolutely horrendous. Probably the worst base stats for the cost in the entire game, but of course the passive is what you're looking for on Soul Reaver. So enemy gods hit by your ability to take 10% current HP as bonus magical damage. This effect will always deal at least 2.5% of the god's max HP over time and only triggers once per ability per god. So it is current HP damage, which does make it a little bit worse. Current HP damage you can basically have over the long term and turn it into max health damage, because if you're hitting someone at 100% health all the way down to 0, you're going to be doing an average of if they had 50% health. So essentially, this is doing 5% max health and bonus magical damage every single time you hit a god with an ability, and that is pretty good. It did get omega nerf, but like it is probably still a good item. I think maybe it does deserve to go up to the B tier. But this item has fallen from grace pretty substantially when it was literally the best item in the game for the longest time until it got pretty hard nerfed. Moving on to Soul Gem, which I'm going to throw straight to the S tier. I think Soul Gem is an amazing item right now. This is one of the go-to rushes for int-based mid laners, and even some int-based solo laners like Chak I've even seen used with this item. So this is 75 int, 15% lifesteal, 15 cooldown rate for 2,500 gold. That is really incredible base stats, to be honest. And then the passive, every 3 or every 4th ability, I guess, you'll deal 30% of your int to each god hit and heal yourself as well, which is insanely good. This item is just good all round. It's middling cost, really good base stats for the cost, and then a really useful passive as well. It's pretty much the go-to lifesteal item in the game at the moment. You know, obviously picks like Anubis love this, but you've seen a lot of mid laners rushing Soul Gem just because the base stats are so good, the passive's so good. Pretty much everything about this item is really good right now. Shogun's kusari is fine. I think we'll throw it to the B tier. This item is basically very similar to the way it worked in Smite 1. 35 magical proc, 200 max health, 15% attack speed, and then 20% attack speed aura. It's relatively expensive. It's a lot more expensive than it was in Smite 1 at 2,700 gold. So as like a lane rush, it's not particularly quite as good. But it's still very good on your auto attack based solo laners. It's still very good occasionally on maybe some supports like Ares if you want to give your team some extra attack speed auras. It's really good for shredding objectives and towers and stuff. It's a pretty decent item, but I won't say it's anything super exceptional. Shifted Shield I think will also go to the B tier. So this is very similar to Smite 1 as well. 20 of each procs, 150 max health, 200 mana, and then while over 75% health, you gain 30 strength and 40 in, and while under 75% health, you gain 20 of each protections. So in general, I think Shifted Shield is pretty fine to build. I think you can pretty much slam this in any tank build and be reasonably happy with it, but it's especially good on characters that utilize strength and int, because it doesn't give you 30 strength or 40 int based on whichever's higher. It just gives you both. And so any characters that are tanks and utilize both stats like Chak and Armor and Mordred and stuff like that will get a little more value out of shifters than mono type users in terms of scaling. And yeah, in general, I think this item's just fine. It's reasonable stats for the cost. It's a big stab bomb basically, and it does the job. Shield of the Phoenix, I think I'll also throw to the B tier. We're getting a lot of items in B tier at the moment. Maybe we should try and differentiate them a little bit, put some in C and some in A. But I think Shield of the Phoenix is also a pretty B tier item in my opinion. Again, it's very similar to Smite 1. It has 25 physical proc, 200 health, 15 cooldown rate, and anytime you hit an enemy god with an ability, you heal 2% max health and mana once per ability. And yeah, this item's fine. It's pretty good on like some solo laners that have like a very low cooldown, consistent damaging abilities like Mordred. But I wouldn't say it's anywhere near essential to be in any of your solo lane builds. It's just pretty good on some picks. Serrated Edge is really good right now. I think I'll throw Serrated Edge to the A tier. So this gives 40 strength and 50% lifesteal, but for each ability on cooldown, you gain 10 strength and 3% lifesteal as well. So if your entire kit's on cooldown, this is giving you 70 strength and 24% lifesteal, which is pretty good, honestly. It's pretty good efficient stats for the cost. Unfortunately, it doesn't have percent pen anymore, so it's not going to be anywhere near as ubiquitous as it was in Smite 1 in terms of just this item had like pretty much every stat you ever wanted on it. It had like power, it had lifesteal, it had movement speed, it had percent pen. It has less of those stats in Smite 2, but I do think the item is still really good if you're looking for some strength lifesteal. Scepter of Dominion. Where on earth do we put this item, dude? I've never seen it used effectively, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I think I'm going to throw it to the D tier for now. But honestly, this is the kind of item that, like, it could be F tier, it could be S tier. I have no clue whatsoever. So this is the stasis item. This gives you 30 int, 200 health, 300 mana, 3 MP5. And then after 2 seconds, everyone in the area becomes stasis for 2 seconds and cooldown of 90. Stasis basically means you are completely taken out of the game. You can't take damage, you can't act, you can't move, you can't do anything. And this affects allies and enemies, and it can be a really interesting item. I think it's a fun item to use. You can basically just like separate a fight in a way with it. You can also just like drop it on the enemy Phoenix, and it forces the enemies to move away. You can use it for zone control. I do think there's some powerful uses of this item, but honestly, I've not really seen it used very effectively, even in like a high level play where you would expect it to be used the most, like high level communication play like SPL. And I've never really seen it used very well, so I think for now we'll throw it to the D tier until someone actually pulls it out and shows what it can do. Ruinous Ankh, I'm going to throw to the S tier. This item's insane right now, man. So it's 2100 gold, one of the cheapest items in the game. It gives 30 of each protections and 150 max health, which is not amazing base stats, but for the cost, it's actually not too bad. And then obviously just the 40% anti-heal aura. So it's basically like Pestilence from Smite 1, but even better. Pestilence was 25% in Smite 1. This is giving like Brawlers and Divine level of anti-heal, but just in an aura around you. And basically, the main reason this item's in the S tier is just that healing is so prevalent in the game right now. You have items like Soul Gem being super strong. You have ADCs building a lot of life steal with like Devos and Bloodforge and Serrated and stuff. And then of course you have team healers like Baron and Yamoja running around. You have a lot of self-sustain from gods like Armor and Shaq. There's just Anubis as well. There's just so much healing in the meta right now that Ruinous ankh is just kind of an essential in your tank builds a lot of the time. Obviously, it's not something you have to build every single game. Some games they won't have enough healing to warrant this, but most games they will. I would say like 80% of games right now you could benefit from a Ruinous ankh. You know, not just for like a Baron and a Yamoja, but stuff like Anubis, stuff like Shaq, stuff like Armor that just have a lot of self-sustain. Next up is Rod of the Booty, which I think I'll throw to the C tier. I don't really see anyone building this, and I don't particularly build it myself. I think it is fine to kind of like round out your builds. It's 70 int, 250 mana, 2 MP, 5, 10% pen, and then you gain an additional intelligence equal to 20% of your intelligence from items, which can be really powerful if you have like a super high intelligence build. You know, maybe you're going something like a Book of Thoth into, where is that item? Necronomicon. This thing gives 200 int when fully stacked. So if you're going for that kind of ridiculously high int build, Rod of the Booty can be good, but honestly, ridiculously high int builds aren't particularly the meta right now. People are going a lot more utility stats like Soul Gems, cooldown rate, and lifesteal. Cooldown rate is obviously incredibly popular. The build meta right now is more so just looking at like getting a lot of pen and a lot of cooldown and just spamming your abilities out consistently rather than going for something like a Necronomicon and Rod of the Booty and stuff that makes one of your ability rotation hit super hard. Generally, the meta is more so going for just spamming out multiple ability rotations. So Rod of the Booty isn't amazing right now, but I think it does have a lot of potential. I think the item's okay at the moment, and if builds do trend more towards stuff like Necronomicon and stuff where you're just getting a lot of int, if you get like 600-700 in your build, then Rod of the Booty does become really good. You know, 20% of 700 int, if you have that much in your build, you know, that's going to be 140 int. You're going to be getting 210 int from this item. So I do think it can be really powerful, just at the moment the meta doesn't super favor it. Kin size, straight to the S tier. The item is good. It's always been good in Smite 1. This is 30 strength, 25% attack speed, 4% max health damage. There's no scaling to this anymore in Smite 2 compared to what there was in Smite 1, where if the god has like less than, I think it was 2750 HP, then the effect scales down to deal less damage, and then scales up if they have way more HP. This is just a flat amount like it was in the OG days of Smite 1, and it makes the item super strong. You know, even against squishies, this is still dealing a decent amount of damage, considering how much health there is in the game at the moment in terms of base health. You know, squishies are frequently reaching 2500 base health, so kin size procs, even on squishies, are doing 100 damage, which is a lot. And of course, on tanks, when they're getting close to 4k HP, this is going to be doing, you know, an absolute crap ton of damage. And as I mentioned earlier, crit is definitely out of the meta in favor of kins at the moment. Kins is definitely the way you want to go on your ADCs, and yeah, it's a really strong item. Prophetic Cloak, I think I'll throw to the A tier. Prophetic has been seeing a lot more play recently, and I think for good reason. They made a buff to it relatively recently where they reduced the internal cooldown from 5 seconds to 8 seconds. Sorry, from 8 seconds down to 5 seconds in terms of how quickly you can stack it up, which is really good. And yeah, the base stats on this item for the cost once you have stacked it up are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this thing is 45 of each protections and 20 cooldown rate. You know, that is way better than, for example, Spirit Robe's base stats. Obviously, Spirit Robe has way more protections when you get hit by a hard CC, but 45 of each protections and 20 cooldown rate for 2400 gold is already really good. Obviously, it takes a long time to stack. It's a slow item to get online, but then you also get 6% or 12% damage mitigations. And if the cap for the 12% is 350 pros, you're so easily going to reach that. And I'm pretty sure this isn't even protections from items in Smite 2. It includes base protection. So if you have over 175 of both protections, you're going to be getting the 12% damage mitigation from this, which is going to happen every single game. Even if you're going a damage item or two in your build, you're going to reach that. And so yeah, Prophetic Cloak is super popular right now on supports and solo laners. I think it's a really good item. Polynomicon, we will throw to the B tier. I think Polynomicon is insanely strong at the moment, but there aren't really any users of it. That's the problem. So the base stats aren't amazing. It's 80 int, some mana, some MP5. But basically, the passive in Smite 2 no longer has an internal cooldown like it did in Smite 1. So basically, the way Hydra's Lament worked in Smite 1 is now how Polynomicon works in Smite 2. It activates on every ability, no matter how often you're using it. And it still deals 65% of your int as bonus magical damage, which, you know, if you got like 500 int in your build, that's going to be dealing like 300 damage per Polynomicon proc, which is really good. The problem is there just aren't any insane users of Polynomicon right now. You know, there's no Scyllas and stuff like that. And so I think as more good users of the item get added to the game, and maybe if really high in builds like I was mentioning earlier with Road to Tahuti and Necronomicon, if they become more popular, Polynomicon becomes better as well. But yeah, I think the item's good. There's just no real amazing users for the item at the moment. Phoenix Feather, I'm going to throw to the B tier, which might be a bit of a hot take. I don't really see anyone building this item, but I do think it's super strong. So this is an active item. It gives you 65 magical prot, 275 max health for 2400 gold, which is pretty decent-ish base stats already. But the active, you are healed 300 HP plus 30% missing HP. Yes, the cooldown is 4 minutes, but this thing can absolutely turn a fight on its head. This thing can heal you 1000 health very easily. Yeah, if you've got 4000 health, 30% of your missing HP, if you're very low, can easily be healing you over 1000, and then you got a 300 extra on top of that. It can really turn fights. The thing is, once they know you have Phoenix Feather, they might start playing around it and not chasing you when you're low HP when they think it's up. I think this item probably gets more value when I build it sometimes because people don't expect me to be building it. They're not checking my build, and then randomly in a fight I heal like 1500 HP out of nowhere and then turn the fight on its head. I think it's probably stronger when less people are building it, honestly, with this item. But I do think it's pretty underrated right now, which is why I think I'll throw it to the B tier. It's not one of the best items in the game or anything, but it is good. Only Hunter's Garb also goes to the B tier in my opinion. This item's fine. It's very similar to Smite 1. It gives magical prots, max health, mana, MP5, and then 4% damage mitigation for every enemy near you, capping 3 stacks, 12% in total. It's a fine item. Not too much to say really about Only Hunters. If you need magical defense for the late game, it is really good. Obsidian Shard goes to A tier for the same reason as Titan's Bane. This is just the intelligence equivalent of Titan's Bane. You get into, then you get the shattering effect, 20% pen. Ulswan Spear, I'll throw to the A tier. I think Ulswan Spear is a really, really good item right now for junglers, strength-based junglers. So this gives 40 strength, 5% pen, and enemy gods hit by your abilities lose 1 per level physical protection. So you generally don't want to like rush this item, even though it is flat pen, because it scales up per level. So generally, you're going to want to build this in sort of like 3rd slot, maybe 4th slot, potentially even 5th slot. But it gives flat pen, which is incredibly powerful. It's very hard to access flat pen in the game at the moment. And 20 flat pen when you're level 20 is going to be really powerful in increasing your damage towards squishy backliners as a jungler. Necronomicon, I think I'll throw to the C tier alongside Road to Tahuti. I think this item has a lot of potential. It's 50 intelligence and 10% pen. And for every kill or assist you gain 50 intelligence, but you lose 10 of each protections per stack. And that can go up to 3 times, and all stacks are removed on your death. So this thing gives 200 intelligence and 10% pen when it's fully stacked, but you do lose 30 of each physical protections. That's the main problem with the item. Losing protections is just super bad. Like honestly, this item would be better if it just said you take 10% more damage per stack. Maybe not quite that much. Maybe if it said you take 5% more damage per stack, it would actually be a better item. That's how protections scale. Like losing 30 of your base like 60-ish protections is just too much of a downside to where I feel like the item is really hard to make work effectively. It can be really powerful on like glass cannons or lifesteal users. You know, you don't really care how much damage you're taking if you're healing for like 1000 health per second, just healing with like soul gem and typhons or whatever. And you also don't care how much damage you're taking if you're barely getting hit and you're just one-shotting people anyway. So I do think there's some potential with the item, but at the moment the downsides are just too heavy for it, I think. And also if you are dying a lot, if you're dying pretty frequently, I'd never build this item because the stacks are removed on death and it's going to give you 50 and 10% pen for 2700 gold, which is horrendous. Musashi's dual swords I'll throw to the C tier, just basically because crit is not great right now. So this is the crit item that gives you movement speed on hits. There's nothing too special about it. It's very expensive for what it does. And you know what, while we're at it, we may as well grab the rest of the crit items, just rank them all together. I think that kind of makes sense. So Demon Blade, I think I'll also throw to the C tier. This is the same thing basically, but you get attack speed instead on hit instead of movement speed. So 25 strength, 20% attack speed, 20 crit, 2750 gold. I think this thing is a little bit better, honestly, than Musashi's, but probably not enough to bump it up a tier. Death Metal I will throw to the same tier as well. So this is the strength and int crit item, and you gain strength, int, and attack speed from an active effect on a 60-second cooldown. And finally, Deathbringer will throw to the B tier, just because Deathbringer is the reason you go crit. It is the most powerful crit item. It always has been. You're generally building this alongside a couple of other crit items. It's a little better, but as I've said throughout the video, crit is not in the meta right now. You're definitely favoring kin size a lot more. And that's merely just because of how much of a tank meta we're in. It's not necessarily that you can only play tanks, but there's a lot of strong tanks from solo lane and support, and there's also some bruiser junglers going around like Armor and Shaq. Moving on to Leviathan's Hide. So I don't really see this item seeing too much play, honestly. We'll throw it to the C tier for now, but we'll check its stats. So it's 30 physical prot, 300 max health for 2500 gold. Pretty decent-ish base stats, but not great. And then enemies who hit you with basic attacks lose 10% strength for up to 2 stacks. Like, yeah, this is kind of okay. Making them lose strength is kind of fine, but honestly, it's more prevalent in a crit meta, of course, because making them lose strength is going to hurt their crits a lot more than, like, for example, if they're just spamming kin size procs. And yeah, ultimately, I don't think the item is super effective right now at countering auto-attackers, and also auto-attackers aren't particularly in the meta at the moment anyway. It's more so like cooldown reduction spam. Speaking of cooldown reduction spam, I think Jotuns is going to go to the A tier. Jotuns is a really good fundamental item at the moment. It's definitely one of my go-to rushes for strength junglers. The stats are just pretty good. 35 strength, 25 cooldown rate. It's middling cost, and then you get that extra like cooldown reduction effects from the passive. It can allow you to make some plays, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, Jotuns is just a good item. It's one of the best jungle rushes in the game. Jade Scepter. This is going to be a hot take. This item is really good. I'm tempted to put this item in S tier, but I genuinely think Jade Scepter is one of the better items in the game right now. So this is the active item that displaces enemies up and away from you. It's actually a really, really high knockup. And obviously in Smite, the knockup height is how long the CC lasts. Basically, gravity is always the same. So basically, if you knock them up higher, they're going to be knocked up for longer. And the knockup is super high. It's 2550 gold, which is pretty cheap for what it gives, honestly. And 80 int 200 max health is decent-ish base stats as well. Like, if you just compare this to something like Wish Granting Pearl, the stats are almost identical because you don't really care about the mana from Wish Granting Pearl, but you get that incredibly powerful active effect on a 60-second cooldown. Every minute you can do this. So if someone's like waiting on their ultimate cooldown to engage, you're pretty much always going to have Jade Scepter to just throw them away from you. It's an incredibly powerful item, genuinely. I think this item is super good, and I think a lot of the mid laners that are like complaining that they don't have Aegis or they don't have bees to like counter stuff, just buy Jade Scepter, honestly. This deals with tanks and junglers diving you so easily, especially if you have a movement ability as well, or a lot of movement speed. You know, if you're like Poseidon or a Zeus or something that has a lot of movement speed, you can just Jade Scepter them away, and then by the time they've hit the ground and are able to chase you again, you're fucking miles away. Like, this item keeps you so safe, man. I think Jade Scepter is super underrated right now. Okay, I've just realized I've been recording for 40 minutes already, and we're only about halfway through, so I'm going to try and speed up once again with these items. So, Hydra's Lament, A tier. This item's good. Gives you increased basic attack damage on your next basic attack. You all probably know this item if you played Smite 1. It's super good. There's a lot of good AA cancelers coming into the game recently, like Thor. Susanoo's been in the game for a long time. Loki obviously uses this item really well. Next up is Hussar's Wings, which I do think is pretty good, honestly. I think I almost want to throw it to the A tier, but yeah, you know what? I will. I think this item is really good. So if you have a look at it, it's 25 of each protections and 200 health for 2150 gold, which is pretty decent base stats. And then you also get a 30-second cooldown, cleanse of all slows, slow immunity, and 20% movement speed for 6 seconds. That is kind of insane. Like, it's very different to the AoE team sprint that doesn't give slow immunity. The fact that this thing gives slow immunity and cleanses all slows is kind of insane. And it lasts for 6 seconds with a cooldown of 30. Like, the fact that the cooldown is so low is the main reason this item is so broken. I do think this item is super good. It's insanely cheap. The base stats are really good. The effect is insane on an insanely low cooldown. Helm of Radiance is fine. I think Helm of Radiance is decent. So this is the physical protection and int item where you gain more physical protection up to 5 stacks. And when this thing is stacked up, it's 60 int and 55 physical protection. The base stats are pretty decent for the cost at that point. But of course, it does take a little while to stack up. I think the item is honestly a bit overrated. I'm tempted to put it down to the C tier, honestly, which since B tier is already getting very populated, I might actually do that. I do think Helm of Radiance is pretty overrated right now, in my opinion, but you can build it. It gives some int and some physical protection if that's what you're looking for. Helm of Darkness will throw to the B tier. I think Helm of Darkness is pretty good. This is sort of coming into the meta a lot more. We're seeing a lot more people build it. This is the int, both kind of protections, and you become stealth on a 90-second cooldown. It's very expensive, but it is a powerful effect. Obviously, it's only useful on certain gods. You know, some gods you're not going to want to stealth to get into the backline, and you may want to stealth to get away. It can keep you a little bit safe, but I feel like if you're using it to get away, just go Jade Scepter instead. I feel like it's generally going to be a better option. It's on a lower cooldown. It costs less money. The base stats are generally a bit more attractive. So if you're using it for running away, I would just recommend Jade Scepter instead. But if you're using it for engage, or if you want to use it for sometimes engaging and sometimes running away, I think Helm of Darkness can be really good. Heartseeker is insane. We'll throw it to the A tier. It's a really good item. It's probably not worthy of S tier in my opinion, but this just deals percent max HP based on your strength. And if you have a ton of strength in your build, this effect can scale up really heavily. You know, if you've got like 300 strength in your build, this is dealing 9% max HP. If you've got 400 strength in your build, it's dealing 12% max HP. And it has no subsequent reduction like it does in Smite 2, and it's also max health, not current health, like Soul Reaver is. So yeah, I think Heartseeker is definitely way better than Soul Reaver at the moment. Honestly, I'm tempted to throw it to S tier. I think in most of your jungler builds, if you're not building Heartseeker, you're kind of trolling. I think it's a really good item. Haze of Vitalis will throw it to the S tier as well. I've made a rant on this item recently. It's just a stupid, insanely good item for ADCs at the moment. It reduces the basic attack movement penalty down to 0 over the course of 3 basic attacks. You probably know about this item if you've been playing Smite 2 or Smite. It's really good. There's not too much more to say about it. If you want a more in-depth explanation, I've got a full video on it. Golden Blade, I think I'll throw to the B tier, C tier, B tier, C tier. I don't really know where to put this, honestly. I think it's okay. We'll have a look at the stats, I suppose, before I decide. There's 25 strength, 150 max health, 20% attack speed for relatively cheap, and your basic attacks deal 25 plus 10% of your item protections as AoE damage. And yeah, I think this item could be really good, but the issue is it scales off of item protections instead of just being like a base amount of like your auto attack damage like it was in Smite 1, and that makes it kind of weird to build because you want to rush it, but then you have like almost no item protections, or literally no item protections if all you have is Golden Blade, and it means that like the 10% of item procs is pointless and it's just dealing 25 and it's not really that great. I think maybe if it included base protections or if it scaled in a different way, like maybe it scaled per level as well or something like that, it might be a little bit better, but it's just kind of hard to justify this because you want it for the early game and it's not too useful late game, but only late game do you have the protections to make this really super effective. But it is okay on some solo laners, like Armor's mainly the only like viable meta solo laner that really uses this, to be honest, but it is okay. Pribwin is kind of bad, honestly. I'm not a massive fan of Pribwin at the moment, so it's 25 of each procs, 20 cooldown rate for 2550 gold. It's pretty mid base stats, honestly. And then it gives you a shield and AoE damage around you as an active effect on a 45-second cooldown. Actually, 45 seconds is kind of low for this kind of effect, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, maybe it's a little bit better than I gave it credit for. Maybe we'll throw it to the B tier. Glad Shield goes straight to S tier. This is one of the best items in the game right now. Glad Shield is super good. 2350 gold, 40 physical protection, 150 health, 20 cooldown rate. Very competitive base stats for the cost, and then you get that bonus effect of 15 plus 30% of your item protections on your abilities. And yeah, this item's super good. It's seeing play on every solo laner. Basically, every ability-based solo laner is building this, and a lot of supports are even building this. You even occasionally see it picked up on bruiser junglers as well. The item's just super strong. Genji's guard is fine. I'll throw Genji's guard to B tier. This is a pretty good magical defense option if that's what you're looking for. Gives protections, mana, cooldown rate, and then burst of protections when you're hit by magical damage. It's a pretty good item. Gem of Isolation, I'll throw to the B tier. Generally, this in Smite 1 is like something that I will probably throw to the F tier. But honestly, I do think Gem of Isolation is quite a bit better in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1. And that is firstly because it has no internal cooldown. You're always getting that slow. And also the base stats are actually a little bit more attractive in Smite 2 compared to what they were in Smite 1. They're still not amazing for the cost, but 50 in, 350 max health for 2500 gold. You know, if you compare it to something like Wish Granting Pearl, it is relatively competitive. It gives more health and less power, but also does have that pretty powerful passive. And I think there are some good users of this. You know, Anubis is a good user of this. Kukulkan is a good user of this. And yeah, I do think the item is definitely better in Smite 2 compared to what it was in Smite 1. But not really an insane item by any means, which is why I think I'll throw it to the B tier. Gauntlet of Thebes, I'll throw to like, I guess the C tier. Gauntlet of Thebes is not really too great. They kind of omega nerfed it. So it's 2200 gold, 150 health, 150 mana, and then stacks up to give you overall a total of 40 protections of each, which is pretty good. Once you get it stacked up, it's pretty decent, but like honestly, they kind of omega nerfed this thing. It doesn't give the protection already more either, which isn't really great. Eye of the Storm. Now, I don't really know where to put this one. I think I'm going to throw it to the C tier for now, but honestly, I don't really see anyone using it, and I've not tried it out too much myself. So this is 2550 gold, 30 strength, 20 of each protections, 150 max health. So the base stats are pretty okay, honestly. The base stats are pretty decent. And then the active is a toggle that vortexes enemies towards you, and they recently changed this item to deal 3% max health magical damage instead of true damage. And so if you're building this in a tank build, you're going to be mitigating that magical damage by probably like 60-70% compared to the true damage that it was dealing to you before. So you can have this thing active for, you know, like twice as long, probably more than twice as long as what you could before. So I do think the item is a lot stronger now they made it magical damage instead of true damage. But honestly, I've not really seen anyone use it. I should probably try it out myself on stream at some point and figure out if the item's actually good. But at the moment, I don't think it's great. Eye of Providence is really good. I'll throw Eye of Providence to the A tier. This is the ward active item, basically. This is 25 of each procs, 300 max health for 2300 gold. So pretty competitive base stats, honestly. You know, like compared to Thebes, you pretty much get the similar amount of stats to Thebes, more max health, but less procs, but you get them up front. And then you also get that active that allows you to place a ward every 60 seconds, which is just really good. You know, if you forget your wards, this item's good. If you want extra wards, this item's good. Wards win games, we all know that. The item's good. The base stats are pretty competitive as well. You're not losing too much for going for that ward effect. Doom Orb is ass, I'm not gonna lie. I don't see any real reason to build Doom Orb over something like Book of Thought at the moment. So it gives 75 int, 10% pen, and some mana stats for 2850 gold compared to like Book of Thought, for example, that is 2300 gold. And then it has that similar passive to Smite 1. You gain 1% movement speed and 4 int per stack. So you're gonna be getting 5% movement speed and 20 int. So it's 95 int and back stacks on Doom Orb. Book of Thought is gonna give way more than that on its own, even if you don't build any other mana items. And it also comes with 10 flat pen compared to 10% pen, which generally, if you're doing these as a rush, which is what you should be doing with these items, the 10 flat pen is going to be more valuable. And so, yeah, I don't see any reason to build Doom Orb when Book of Thought gives you better stats for 650 less gold or 550 less gold. Like, I don't see much reason to ever build Doom Orb, honestly. Divine Ruin, I'll throw to the S tier for the same reason I threw Ruinous Ankh to the S tier. Anti-heal is incredibly important right now. There's so much healing going around in the game with all the lifesteal, all the self-sustain, all the team healing. Building anti-heal is just going to be really good. You should be building Divine Ruin most games. Devourer's Gauntlet we'll throw to the A tier. This is basically the go-to rush for lifesteal for ADCs. Junglers don't really build it anymore since it took a couple of nerfs. But yeah, the item is good. It stacks up. It gives you 10 flat pen, which is really powerful. Flat pen is hard to come by, as I said, but a lot of these stacking items have retained their 10 flat pen that they brought over from Smite 1. And yeah, it's just a really efficient stat stick once you get it stacked up. Gives you a lot of strength, a lot of lifesteal. It's really good for ADCs. Demonic Grip is kind of bad, honestly. I'll throw it to the D tier. The main reason is, like, you just don't really have a reason to build Demonic Grip. There aren't really any gods that use it super well at the moment. Generally, you're not going to want intelligence and attack speed on the same item. You know, there are some intelligence users that like attack speed, but a lot of the time, if you're an intelligence user that likes attack speed, you're often just better off going strength items anyway, because strength scales 100% on your auto attacks compared to int that scales 20%. So int attack speed items are kind of like a very weird niche. It can be useful on some characters, don't get me wrong, which is why it's not like in the F tier or anything, but I don't think Demonic is super good. A lot of the times, if you are an auto attacker, you're just better off going Executioner, because that strength is going to scale your autos better and give you the same effect. Dagger of Frenzy, underrated in my opinion. I think I'll throw it to the B tier. I don't think the item's super insane, but I am a big fan of this item personally. So this gives 40 strength and 15% attack speed for 2,500 gold. The base stats are pretty bad, but the active, you gain 40 basic attack damage and 30% attack speed for 6 seconds on a 30-second cooldown. This is one of the lowest active cooldowns in the game, and you're basically going to have it up often multiple times per fight. You can use it for shredding objectives. You can even use it for like wave and camp clear if you want. The cooldown is that low. And 40 basic attack damage, you know, it's not going to scale your abilities, but that's sort of like adding 40 strength in a way. It's not quite that good because, as I said, it's not going to scale your abilities, but 30% attack speed as well. Like, the active effect is super powerful on this for how low of a cooldown it is, and I think the item is a bit underrated right now. Brawlers to S tier for the same reason as Divine and Ankh. We won't talk much more about that. Braggy's Harp is really good right now, I think. We'll throw it to the A tier. So I know I did just talk about int attack speed items not being particularly good, and Braggy's Harp is an int attack speed item, but it also comes with strength, which is really nice, and it's mainly the passive that you're wanting this thing for. So all targets hit by your basic attacks take 10 plus 3 per level bonus magical damage. So that's going to be 70 bonus damage at level 20. Which is, you know, almost comparable to kin size. Not quite. Kin size is going to be doing 100 on squishies and probably closer to 150 on tanks. So it's not really like anywhere near on the level of kin size or anything. But kin size also scales based on max HP. So kin size in the early game is pretty bad. And Braggy's Harp generally is something you're going to be building a bit earlier on in your build. And it really does help increase your basic attack damage a lot. It's super good on those sort of strength in attack speed hybrid characters. It's a bit of a niche item, but on some gods that do like to utilize this, like Danzaburo or Izanami or something like that, it can be really good. Bracer, also a really good item in my opinion. So this is an int attack speed item again. I know I'm kind of going back on my promise that int attack speed is bad, but some of the int attack speed items are actually really good. And Bracer of the Abyss is one of them. So this gives 60 int, 25% attack speed, 15 cooldown rate. So the base stats are already quite attractive, and whenever you hit an enemy god or jungle boss with an ability, you gain 15 basic attack damage, and that stacks up to 4 times. And those last 10 seconds. So you're going to basically have this up for the entire fight once you do get it stacked up. And it's 60 basic attack damage. So while this item doesn't come with any strength, it's almost like it does come with almost 60 strength, because you're getting 15 basic attack damage off of that per stack, which is going to be 60 in total. So 60 in, 60 basic attack damage, 25% attack speed, 15 cooldown rate. It's just a lot of stats, basically. This item's really good on stuff like armor solo. Book of Thoth, straight to the A tier, I think. Book of Thoth is one of the best rushes for mid laners at the moment. If you're not rushing Soul Gem, you're probably rushing Book of Thoth into Soul Gem. This item is really good right now. We talked about it a lot with Doomor, but it's just basically going to give you the most int of almost any item in the game. Infinite mana as well, and of course that important 10 flat pen they brought over from Smite 1, which is super powerful for the early game, and also it's 2300 gold, man. It's one of the cheaper items in the game, which is kind of good. Bloodforge, I think I'll throw to the A tier. I think Bloodforge is being underrated a little bit at the moment. So this gives 45 strength, 15% attack speed, 10% lifesteal, which is relatively competitive on the base stat side of things. And then you also gain 10% max HP plus 100% of strength from items HP shield, which is really strong. You know, 10% of your max health in the late game as a squishy, you're going to have about 2500 HP. That's about 250 right there. Then 100% of strength from items as an ADC, you might have another 250 strength. So it's going to be like a 500 HP shield, which is really impressive. And the shield also grants 20% lifesteal and causes lifesteal to heal nearby allies as well, which is really powerful. The cooldown is pretty long. It's 150 seconds, which is kind of hard to stomach, but killing a god does half the current cooldown, which is pretty powerful as well. You know, if you use this to win a trade in a team fight and you end up killing that god, it's going to be a 70-second cooldown, so it's definitely definitely a lot more manageable. Bloodbound Book is very similar, and again, I think this item's also underrated. It's basically the intelligence equivalent. It gives int, max health, lifesteal, and you gain 10% max HP plus 80% of int from items in a HP shield. And 80% of int versus 100% of strength is definitely a winning trade in the int's favor. You're gonna have a lot more int in your build, so that's really good. And then same effect, 20% lifesteal and lifesteal heals nearby allied gods while the shield is active. And yeah, I think Bloodbound Book is also pretty underrated right now. I think Bloodforge is better. I think its base stat spread is generally better, but Bloodbound Book is still really good as well. Berserker Shield is fine. I'll throw it to the B tier. It's just a big stat bomb, basically. You get some extra attack speed while Berserk and some protections and stuff. It's a pretty decent item, but nothing too crazy. Screeching Gargoyle is fine. I'm not a massive fan of Screeching Gargoyle. This is the silence active item that silences everyone in front of you. The base stats are 50 magical prot and 20 cooldown rate, so not amazing base stats for the cost, and silence for 2 seconds on a cooldown of 90. It can be really powerful. It's good for like interrupting channeled abilities or just locking someone down. But generally, I feel like Jade Scepter is a much more attractive option because it's just on a lower cooldown. At least for safety anyway. Screeching Gargoyle can be better if you want to use it as an offensive option. So I do think Screeching Gargoyle can be decent, which is why it's in the B tier. But I don't think it's super amazing, really. Pharaoh's Curse is amazing, though. We'll throw it to the S tier. This item did take some nerfs recently to the active cooldown. But it's still a really, really good item. It gives 40 of each protections, 15% attack speed for 2300 gold. So decent-ish base stats, but nothing amazing. But the active effect, 25% slow and 25% attack speed reduction for 6 seconds on a 60-second cooldown. That is incredibly powerful. This is going to be up for basically every team fight. It might even be up twice in some fights. And yeah, it's just insanely good. Like, enemies aren't escaping you when they're 25% slow, and there's a lot less jumps in the game at the moment, so it's even more powerful. Pharaoh's Curse is super good. Nemean is trash, honestly. We'll throw it to the D tier for now, but let's have a look at its stats. So it's 50 prots, 200 health, some HP 5 for 2550 gold. Reflects 12.5% of all basic attack damage back to the attacker, and then you can activate it to deal double for 3 seconds. The cooldown is really long on it though, 120 seconds, so it might not be up for every single fight, and generally, Nemean is best when crits in the meta, because crit damage adds to the basic attack damage itself, so you're reflecting more. But this won't reflect stuff like Kid Size and Bragi's procs and stuff, so it's much less good in the current ADC meta. Dreamer's Idol and Parashu, we'll throw Dreamer's Idol to maybe like C tier and Parashu to like B tier. I think Parashu is a little bit better right now because they did give it a buff recently to give it a lot more strength. And these are the 2 active items to give you a 20% boost for 10 seconds to your respective stat. So Dreamer's Idol is 95 int, 2700 gold for the effect. And Avatar's Parashu is 75 strength, 2700 gold for the effect. And the reason I think Parashu is better is just 75 strength is going to be a lot more valuable than 95 int. 75 strength is actually some of the highest in the game. I think the only thing that outclasses this for base strength is full stack Transcendence. And yeah, you can get a 20% boost as well, which if you have like, you know, 300 strength in your build by late game, which is pretty reasonable, this is going to give you an extra 60 while that effect is active. So it's 135 strength from one item while the effect lasts, of course, and it is only going to be up every couple of fights. But I do think Parashu is good. We've seen a little bit more play of it recently after it got the buffs. Sunbeam Bow I will also throw to B tier. So they have recently, I believe, fixed the interaction where you can use this on no mana gods, which is kind of sad. But even on the gods where you don't have 0 mana and you can use this item infinitely, even when you do have to manage your mana with it, I do think it's still a pretty decent item. It does a lot of extra damage for you. But honestly, I think the main reason it was being abused was on those no mana gods. I don't think it's like a super insane item otherwise. Staff of Mirrodin. So this is an item that I originally thought was going to completely break the game when it was introduced, but honestly, it's not been as good as I thought. I think I'm going to throw it to the B tier. So this is the item where the active effect, your next non-ultimate ability use will have no cooldown. It's an incredibly powerful active effect, but it's very expensive. The base stats for the cost are pretty trash. And the cooldown is 150 seconds. So realistically, you're only using this like once every 2 team fights pretty much. Maybe once every fight if there's a lot of downtime in between fights. And it can be really powerful. You know, certain gods where they have like really quick activating abilities that can just get the burst damage out fast, it can be really good. But honestly, the cooldown kind of holds this thing back. If it was on like a 90-second cooldown or something, I think it would see a lot more play. Cersei's Hexstone is S tier. This item is completely broken, man. It should be in pretty much every tank build, honestly, I think. Especially on supports, it's really good, but even on some solo laners, even on some junglers, you can make use of this item. And this is the active that turns you into a ball. You gain CC immunity, you charge forward, you deal 10% current HP damage, and you knock them up. And you also gain protections while polymorphed as well, so you take a bit less damage. The base stats are honestly not horrendous. They're not amazing, but it's 400 max health and 10 cooldown rate plus some regen for 2600 gold. But it's the active effect you want this for. Cooldown of 90 seconds, so it is going to be only up, you know, realistically once every fight, maybe. But that is honestly all you need from this item. It allows you to engage, it allows you to land follow-up, it allows you to give dashes to gods that didn't have dashes, or an extra dash to gods that do already have mobility. It's just really powerful, honestly. This item's super good. Arendite, I don't know why Arendite is here. I must have accidentally pulled that in with all of the images that I pulled from my downloads folder. That is not in Smite 2 at the moment. Amanita Charm, I think is fine. We'll throw it to the B tier. This is the mushroom active. Some protection, some health, some HP 5, and then you create a mushroom on a 60-second cooldown that heals allies near it. The item's fine. I think it's getting countered a little bit at the moment because of how strong anti-heal is. There's so much healing in the game at the moment that everyone builds anti-heal, and you kind of get in a situation where Amanita Charm gets nerfed inherently because of that. But I still think the item is usable. It's still an okay item if you want to like heal out of combat, or maybe even in combat, but it is kind of hard to use it in combat because it requires everyone to stay in this very small area, and you got to get AoE down if you do that. But yeah, I think it is still good for, like, you know, healing up on sieges, healing up on objectives and stuff like that. Mystical Mail, S tier. This is one of the best items in the game, honestly. Mystical Mail is just super insane in Smite 2 right now. The base stats are incredible for some reason. Like 40 physical protection, 350 health is one of the best like stat spreads for like trading against a physical lane opponent in solo lane, and it also has that incredibly powerful passive effect that helps you with your wave clear and damage. 2650 gold is relatively steep, but honestly compared to some other rushes in solo lane like Breastplate of Valor, that's about the same amount of gold. Like a lot of other rushes are quite expensive as well. Even Glad Shield is 2350, and so honestly it's not too bad cost wise, and it's one of the best items in the game for like a rush in solo lane. Chronos Pendant is good. I think I'll throw Chronos Pendant to the A tier. Cooldown is really strong right now, and just Chronos Pendant gives you even more of that cooldown. The more cooldown rate you already have, the more valuable the passive becomes, and so when you're spamming a lot of cooldown in your build, this item becomes even better. And yeah, I think Chronos Pendant is a really good item right now. Life Binder, this is an interesting one. So Life Binder is going to be a hot take. I'm going to throw it to the A tier. So this item never sees any use, and quick caveat, I haven't really used this item much myself either, but just looking at it makes me feel like it should be a really powerful item. So it's 2400 gold, 35 int, 350 max health, 3 HP 5. It's not an amazing stat spread, honestly, for the cost. Well, the active, you deal 130 plus 5 per level magic damage, so that's going to be 230 at level 20. And the first ally that damages the target gains 230 in shield as well, and kills and assists reduce the cooldown by 20%. The cooldown is 30 seconds on this, is the only thing that makes this item super strong in my opinion. This is definitely going to be up multiple times a fight, and also if you do want to just like trade with it, because you count as an ally, so you can get this shield if you want as well. So basically it causes like a 520 health swing every 30 seconds. And kills and assists will reduce that cooldown as well, but that's honestly not that important when the cooldown is so low already. But yeah, just every 30 seconds you can cause a 500 health swing, and it can really swing fights massively. Honestly, even if you're just using this for yourself and you're just using it on enemies and immediately getting the shield yourself, it's really good. But also you can use it for allies as well. Allies can get shields off of them too. Reaper we'll throw to C tier. Reaper I thought was going to be a really good item. It seemed like it was going to be super good, but honestly it's kind of turned out to not really be. So it's 30 strength, 25% lifesteal, and when you hit an enemy god below 30% HP, you gain strength and lifesteal, and then this increases as well as you get kills. Like the threshold increases to where it triggers at 60% health. Honestly, I feel like this item should be good, but I don't really build it anymore. I don't really find a use for it too much. I don't really see other people building it either, which is why I'm probably going to throw it to the C tier. But I don't know, maybe I'll throw it to B. Yeah, I think this item can be good. The stats that it gives are pretty incredible. Gem of Focus straight to the S tier. This is one of the best items in the game. This is really emblematic of the cooldown rate spam meta at the moment. The base stats are pretty bad, 40 in and 20 cooldown for 2600 gold, but that passive effect is just so powerful. You're basically always going to have this at 3 stacks at all times. You can basically read this passive as being always active, which means the item effectively has 85 in, 20 cooldown rate, and 9% movement speed for 2600 gold, which is really good. Pendulum Blade is underrated in my opinion. I'm going to throw it to the A tier. I think Pendulum Blade is really good. They have reduced the cooldown of this active effect absolutely massively. I think it was originally like a 120-second cooldown or something. It's now at 50 seconds, and you get that burst 3 seconds off of all your cooldowns. It is expensive. That's the only drawback to this item at the moment. If this was something more like 2500 gold, I'd be buying it every game, but it is quite an expensive luxury item. Well, 55 strength is pretty high, and every 50 seconds being able to burst your cooldowns back. Again, this is like Chronos Pendant. It's flat cooldown reduction, so the more cooldown you're already spamming in your build, the better this item becomes. So if you've already got something like a Jotun's Wrath and a Tekko and maybe some other cooldown in your build, you can very easily just get a lot of value out of Pendulum Blade. I think it is underrated at the moment. And finally, speaking of Tekko, we have Tekko. Tekko is good too. I'm going to throw it to A tier. Jotun's Wrath and Tekko are very comparable in my opinion. I've been kind of switching between these two items as like my go-to strength cooldown jungler rush. So this is 30 strength, 15 cooldown rate, and every time you use an ability, you gain movement speed and cooldown rate. And much like Gem of Focus, this thing will be active all the time. It's very easy to keep fully stacked up because it lasts 10 seconds. so you can very easily just be using abilities off cooldown and keeping this thing up. And so effectively this gives 30 strength, 30 cooldown rate, and 9% movement speed. And 30 cooldown rate is more than any other item in the game. Every other item in the game maxes out at 25 cooldown rate. So Tekko for some reason gets to bypass that. Of course it is from a passive effect. You don't always have 30 cooldown rate, but you effectively do always have 30 cooldown rate. You can keep this thing stacked up super easily. So yeah, Tekko is really good as well. Very comparable to Jotun's as like a strength cooldown jungler rush. But yeah, there you go. That is my full tier list. I guess we'll delete the F tier. It turns out we didn't really even need it. There was nothing that I felt warranted being down in the F tier. Maybe we could have put Arendite down there because it's not even in the game. But yeah, that is my full item tier list at the moment for Smite 2 post playoffs. This is a combination of my own experiences, what I think is currently strong, what I've been building, what I've seen other people building, and also what we saw in the playoffs in terms of item usage stats and what was working. Hopefully this has been useful to you in terms of generally thinking about what items are good at the moment in your build, and I will catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.